Welcome to the Planner Pals podcast, a podcast hosted by two true Planner Pals. I'm Jess or Jessie Corinne.
And my name is Mark, and I go by Marker Pages. And today, Planner Pals, we have a really exciting episode for you because we're planning with junk. Junk journaling has either found its way to me or it's been, I don't know, just do you feel like it's had like a major, I don't know, a resurgence, or am I just finding out about it?
I feel like you're correct in saying that. I feel like it's become a lot more popular recently. Because it's been around for ages. Like I don't want to actually put like a timestamp on that because I know I will be wrong. But I feel like more recently, especially with the rise of analog and people trying to get offline and combat brain rot and all of these other things, it feels very much in the sphere of that. So it does feel like it's having a moment.
Yeah, it definitely is. So today we're going to be talking about what we like about junk journaling, what we don't like about junk journaling, and kind of just have a good conversation as we always do about topics like this. I mean, me myself, I recently have been like hardcore getting into it, but it's not necessarily just like ripping up papers and stuff. I've been very like specific about using like little stamp punch. This guy over here, I have all my materials laid out for today, but I've been using this thing so much. It's been so much fun to use just to kind of get into it. So I'm just excited for the topic overall. But I think first, Jess, we probably should try to define junk journaling, even though when I think about one thing, someone online always tells me that I'm wrong.
I know, right? And I feel like when we start to fiddle around with definitions, then it's like you're kind of drawing boundaries around something. So we're not going to have us try and define it. We're going to ask the good old internet to do it for us. So now it's their fault, not ours. But according to the interwebs, a junk journal is a handmade book crafted from recycled, repurposed, or overlooked materials like old book pages, junk mail, envelopes, and maps. It serves as a scrapbook, memory book, or art journal. It is used to hold sketches, writing, photos, and mixed media art. So yeah, it does encompass a lot of different things, but really the way that I see it is just it's for fun. It's a creativity thing. It can also be for memory keeping, but the kind of core part of it is that idea of like sustainability, using things that would otherwise be overlooked or thrown away and turning it into something, transforming it into something that is like an artistic expression.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I really like about it because the little baby hoarder in me that loves like collecting things is all about this. When I started playing around with this idea of it, I actually went back to my recycling bin outside in the garage because I was like, last week, Mark wasn't into junk journaling. Did he throw away anything good that might be inside of there? Because then once I got into it, I was just saving all the papers, all the things. And I was like, oh, it's a little dumpster diving in my own trash. Well, more recycling. I don't think I would go through my trash can. That's kind of gross. But like paper recycling, I'm all about it. So I love this idea of being able to kind of pull everything together and try it in different ways. I mean, I personally, and again, here I am like telling people what is or isn't a thing, but my opinion about the definition that the internet gave us, don't blame us if it's wrong, is the idea that it's a handmade notebook. I mean, for me, what I love about it, I'm actually using notebooks that I never ever would. Like I'm using like little Archinov, like little pocket notebooks. I never had a real reason for these. And like I'm starting to fill this little bad boy up with some fun stuff now. And without the idea of like putting things inside of here, I don't know that I would have done that. So I don't think it has to necessarily be a handmade book, more about like kind of what's going inside of it. We all have the extra notebooks that we're not going to use, like line notebooks, for instance.
For sure, exactly. This is a great way to use those kind of notebooks. But I mean, the way that I kind of read the definition, if we're going to be like, very much like black and white, and it's like, oh, you have to use a book that you made yourself. Like you went out and grew your own trees and cut them down and stripped the bark. No, okay. Like if you want to, sure, paper making is also a great hobby. I don't believe that you have to be a paper maker and a bookbinder to be a junk journaler. But if we're thinking about it in terms of handmade, just in the sense of what you're putting into it and bringing together the elements and like sticking them together and such, rather than buying a pre-decorated book, then I'm like, yeah, sure, totally can like jump on the train of junk journaling in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the points that we like about it as we go into it. I mean, even the very first one, I'm like, okay, yeah, but so the first thing and the idea of junk journaling is that imperfection is the point. It's this idea of experimentation. It's this idea of, ripping things, putting them in, layering them, making mistakes, having fun with it. I will tell you though, like even me myself, I have a little bit of issue with that because all of the things that I'm doing with it right now, like things are lining up. It's like, oh, it's spaced a good amount of space. Like I'm so scared about layering. We talked about that with Aaron. I like divulge my soul about my like insecurities around this idea of decorative planning. Like I kind of see it this way, but also I like the idea of kind of just letting it all loose and just being like, you know what, I can do whatever I want with it. If the lines aren't straight, so be it. If something isn't exactly perfect, it's okay. But the overall idea though is like there's really no wrong way to do it, because the wrong way is kind of the right way.
Even though there will definitely be people on the internet who will still tell you you're doing it wrong, and we can put those Nelly naysayers in the bin, out of which we already harvested the good trash.
Yeah, and I think what I love about that idea is that it opens us up to just experimenting and trying. I mean, it's always hard because we know as creators, right? We want to make things and then we want to put them online. We want people to see it, right? We want to inspire people and get them excited. But it doesn't mean that everyone has to do that. You can totally explore a junk journal yourself and just have it at home and never show it to anybody. Like just have fun.
Yeah, I do think that this idea of, imperfection is the point, no rules. I like the fact that that makes the beginning stages feel very approachable because, when you are just getting started with something, like any skill that you're trying to build, you're going to be stuffing things up. Like it just happens. You're still learning the kind of like how to use the tools and the skill set needed and like how you want to lay out pages so that things feel balanced and whatever else. And maybe that's also not even the point of your junk journal. Maybe you're just going in because you want to do something with your hands that isn't scrolling Instagram, Jessica. But I find that the idea of imperfection being okay is still something that is daunting. I don't mind a torn edge. I don't mind things looking a little organic. But if there's absolutely no guardrails, I feel a little overwhelmed. And then I start to get too particular. I still want things to look cohesive and balanced and put together and nice, which means that I know even though it's a self imposed rule, it's still something I bring to new creative hobbies.
I no, I totally feel you. I mean, that's kind of the reaction that I've been getting online as I've been sharing more and more of my stuff. Is people are like, "Oh, you're so worried about everything lining up the right way." Like I've been doing kind of this whole like stamp exploration, right? And I've just been playing around and I'm like, "Okay, I want my lines to be straight." Like I like that. And my imperfection, are the patterns being different. Nothing lining up necessarily. This also plays really well into my color deficiency. Like I don't have to worry about it being color cohesive because don't know what really works well together. And this is a great way for me to be like, it doesn't matter. Put different things together. Try it. Like I try to find some commonality for like a theme as I'm playing around with it, but I just love the freedom of like not having to worry about it, which has been really nice. But at the same time, giving myself some rules to follow as well, just because I need that as I'm much like you. I need that.
Yeah, I do think that having those kind of guidelines for yourself, even if it's just something that you're trying with to get you in the door, like, foot in the door, just getting started, saying, like, okay, I'm not going to open myself up to the entire world of imperfection and junk journaling for any which what way you want to do it. I'm just going to aim to tackle it in this kind of style. And that's the thing that I actually quite like about your junk journaling is that it does have that kind of like, I'm not going to say like a strict guideline, it's more so like a set guideline, so it's very kind of you know what you're going to be creating or how you're going to be putting it together. It's just that the actual materials you use and like the order you place them on the page or something like that, that's where the kind of creativity comes into it a bit more, as opposed to those like, okay, I'm going to use this stamp punch, I'm going to have it aligned in a grid or whatever else.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite part about it, honestly, is I love the way a page looks when it's done. And even when it's not done all the way too, like I'm kind of also treating it kind of like a collection page. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, okay, I want this page to be a collection of Ferris wheel press papers or boxes, right? I've been cutting up and stamping, kind of punching out the boxes that the ink comes inside of because I usually just throw them away. And I'm like, okay, like they're going to look different because they're different colors. There's always different designs and things like that. And I'm not always going to complete a page. And I kind of like that. It reminds me a bit about the bullet journaling part about having a collection page and kind of building a theme around it, but knowing that I don't have to complete it like a work of art every single time I come to it. Like I can kind of let it go and come back to it when something sparks my interest, or maybe I find something else if I am kind of doing like an overall theme. Maybe I find something or stumble upon it where I'm like, oh, that would look really cool on this page, even though it doesn't go together. And then that becomes the theme, which is like a mixed match of whatever with like a common color or a common pattern or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I do think that the idea of being able to bring things together that don't necessarily at face value match is really nice. And if you can get some commonality between them, even if it's like the pattern and the color and like the texture and stuff is all different, having just like the shape or the size of it the same gives you some kind of like cohesivity between the elements in a way. But I also think that One of the things about this idea of like, imperfection's okay and it's totally fine if it's not perfect or whatever, I still feel like there'd be certain things if I put them down on the page and they weren't the right shape or the right size, or like, you're a stamper. If I put the stamp down and it wasn't perfect, I'd just be like, oh my God, I ruined my junk journal.
So that's the great thing about it. I was actually going to mention the stamping part of it because that's always a really big fear of people dealing with inks and clear stamps and rubber stamps. And I do it myself now, even as someone that's been doing it for years. You stamp a little too hard, you kind of get that little edge piece from the corner of the stamp, and usually you're like, oh damn, like that doesn't look like everything else. That's a great example of like use that inside of this junk journal because it kind of feeds to the personality of the page even more than if you're doing a weekly. It can kind of really turn into anything else. Or then you become intentional. You start stamping a little too hard on purpose. And then, maybe you're kind of, I don't know, learning some of those skills out, figuring it out as you're going along. But I love it as a way to experiment and try new things. I think that's kind of one of my favorite parts about it is just like the freedom of it. But like we said, then we're also giving ourselves rules. We so quickly jump right back to like our core like innerness of like I need perfection, but I want to get a little crazy.
That's right. Crazy with guidelines. I'm all for it. I think that one of my favorite things about junk journaling, though, is just giving things second life, especially in the day and age of every gosh dang company having such beautiful packaging materials. Like something comes wrapped in this really cute tissue paper that has, little decorations or doodles on it or whatever. Or maybe you're out at a cafe and they have a paper menu, like one that you can take with you or something. You're not just out here stealing people's menus. That's very rude. But like those kind of things, I love to be able to collect them and not just chuck them away. It's like, no, you are gorgeous, you are beautiful, I want to remember this, I want to kind of like immortalize you in my journal. It's not immortal, it's all paper, it's all going to go out at one point, but I still think it's nice to not just kind of appreciate it in the moment and then get rid of it, take it to landfill, take it to the recycling, but give it that kind of like second life in my notebook.
Yeah, it's been cool. When I was just on vacation, I was doing exactly that. I was being very intentional about it. So I have like everything from like, the flyer you see in the gift shop of like what to do in that town. Usually I've been here before, so like I know what to do in that town. But I like open it up and I was like, oh, look, we've got like shells and like cool stuff. I was at a beach recently, if you can't tell by my gorgeous tan. But like even, things just like people who make art, right? Like this is from one of the art studios that was there. And again, I usually want to grab these things because it's like, well, what the hell am I going to do with this after I read the back of it and learn about the artist? And I was like, oh no, like I have these great images now that I can use and then incorporate them into my journal in some way. And I'm like really excited about this because this is where like part of that memory keeping kind of comes into play because this will be, built around like the theme of my vacation. But it's just this idea that like these are things that I found as I was going through. Like I went to Top Golf and I took the coaster with me. It's busted up and I had a drink on it for 3 hours. So like, it's whatever. But like it's just one of those things where I'm like, oh, now I can punch this out, put this inside of my journal, and then like remember that moment, right? And there's a lot of like really cool things about that I really like about it. But I also simultaneously feel like a little like ferret because I'm like, oh, little pieces of paper, oh, a business card, oh, a flyer, oh, a coaster that I was drinking off. Like I kind of also get to that mode. I'm like, are people looking at me weird for stealing things or like taking the things that usually people leave behind? And I'm like very self conscious.
Yeah, I do kind of worry almost like if I'm so caught up in, trying to collect all these little bits and pieces for my junk journal, am I just collecting stuff because I feel like I need to collect stuff and it isn't actually something that is going to be something I use, or it's going to be, not actually tied to a memory that I want to keep? Not saying there's like, oh God, this is a bad memory and I don't want to keep it or something. More so, it's like, okay, if I'm collecting a flyer, but it's for an activity that I never went and did, then am I just like kind of contributing to excess waste because it's like now I'm collecting things to take them home to realize I didn't actually need to use them and throwing them out at home as opposed to letting somebody else actually use the flyer for its intended purpose or something like that. But also, it's like if I'm constantly on the lookout for things to include, am I missing out on like life and living in that moment? I don't think it's too much of a problem, but I think for some people who are, maybe do fall into that kind of like, oh, collect everything, hoard it like a dragon kind of mindset, maybe you are missing out on other things in those moments when you're just trying to collect stuff. That being said, I do think that it's also kind of like a fun side hobby. You know how we've kind of talked previously, and the internet loves to laugh about the idea of collecting crafting supplies as another hobby into the using crafting supplies. This one, I'm like kind of okay with because at least you're collecting things without having to purchase a whole bunch of stuff in theory because it's junk journaling. You're collecting stuff that would otherwise be thrown away. So that's all right. It's then the kind of like, okay, cool. Now I've collected all these materials that I may or may not use and I have to store them. That's always a fun problem.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am right now, where I have kind of like 2 different boxes set up for myself. I have one that is just all of the things and I'm like, "Oh, this has a cool design on it. I might use this later." Or, this idea that I'm like collecting all the things from my vacation, right, to then use them. And then I also have this box over here where I'm just like right now, like, because I have to do this or else it'll get really bad. Once I see it, I'll like turn it into a stamp or a clip, or if it's small enough, put it in here because otherwise I'm just going to hoard so much paper and then I'm going to lose it. I'll forget about it. So it's almost being like very intentional about it. If I'm like, oh, I'm going to keep this because I want this part, I'll just kind of put it right in front of my face. Or in some cases, if I'm already at home, like go grab my punch and punch it out. And that way I'll go and recycle the rest of the paper. And then I've just been like collecting them inside of here because it's like a lot less to collect inside of like a small container than it is to save like all the big packaging from everything.
I'm just imagining you out and about with your like little punch on a carabiner, like clipped to your belt with one of those like little, I don't know, strings that kind of like retracts to be like, oh, I can use this later, clip. I could use this later, clip.
It's like the guy that's on the train that like punches your little card as you're riding. That's totally me. I would absolutely 100% do that. That's actually a great idea. I'll have to figure out how to attach this to my belt because that just makes I don't have to bring anything home. I'll just clip it in the moment.
Yeah, and have like a little business card keeper for all of your little stamp bits that you've already clipped off so that you can like transport them around with you. So even now we're buying a whole bunch of stuff so that then we can do junk journaling when the point was to use junk.
I literally was like, "Oh, now I need to find a small container that I can buy to keep in my backpack so I can collect all my things." This is the problem that we have. We're trying to think about so many solutions to like all the things, but it's such a good idea.
I guess that's also another kind of concern point that I have with junk journaling because even though the purpose of it is to use junk or recyclable materials, probably not actual like trash because come on, we don't want no stank ass junk journal. But we do have people now who are, selling junk journal packs online. And I'm like, is that a junk journal pack or is that just a collage pack? Because in my mind, if it's junk journal, if it's supposed to be junk, then in theory, I shouldn't have to purchase any new materials to do the hobby. And I think that is the intention. But in the consumerism culture that we're sitting in, huzzah, whatever, it doesn't matter. But like, you get the idea, right? We've got people who are probably going out there and just kind of thinking, okay, awesome, I need to go and acquire a bunch of materials to be able to do this, even though in theory it's supposed to be stuff from everyday life that would have been overlooked initially.
I also see it though as giving something second life. Like a really great example of that, Arch and Olive has been including a lot of those like paper packs inside of their subscription boxes recently. And I've held on to those for years. The vellum, like all the papers, all of this stuff. And I've never had a need for it. And now I do. Like now I'm actually pulling those back out and I'm utilizing those, right? And thinking of different things I can do with them. So like technically, I've had it and it's been wasting away inside of my drawer, right, for all of this time. But it's really cool to be like pop that open and be like, oh, like from the last time that I thought I was going to get into like ephemera journaling and like doing a lot of this kind of stuff, I've like honed it in a little bit more, focused it a little bit more. I'm like, oh, this is really great. Or I have a ton of papers. I've been doing stuff with like Eric Small things because you know me, like I was just like buying up everything I could, not really thinking like, well, how am I going to use these little memo pads or how am I going to use these little, wrapping papers and things like that. I just really love the design of her stuff. So it's turned out really great because now I can have like an Eric Small Things page and I'm actually using and punching those things out. It makes me feel really good. But it is super hard though. I'll tell you, like I've seen people online that have been punching out like containers of like sour cream and like butter and like sodas and candy bars and stuff like that. I am assuming that they are cleaning them out. But like for me personally, I feel like that's going a little bit far. Like I'm not going to be like cutting open my sour cream container to like punch out the cow on the front of it. Though I do like the way it looks because I'm actually scared, exactly like you said, like to have a stank ass journal because I didn't clean my sour cream or butter container well enough and I'm sticking it inside of my journal.
Yeah, I know that like people have a similar thing with like tea and coffee stain pages. If they live in certain climates and whatnot, they can't necessarily rely on their journals not going moldy because you don't want a moldy journal. That's not really the vibe, like, it's called a junk journal, and sure, we've titled this as like making a journal with trash, but like, let's not turn our journals into trash by putting things in there that realistically don't have longevity. But I do like your point though about that idea of maybe some of the materials we have acquired over time, the ones that we're like, oh yeah, I'd love to use this, but I don't know how. Junk journaling could be a really good way to utilize those because it is so freeform and there are the kind of like, no rules and it can be very imperfect and such. Gives you the opportunity to play around and experiment with those materials that have just been sitting in a drawer or on your shelf or whatnot, being like, please love me, do something with me. It'd be nice to actually give them a home.
Yeah, I'm excited about some different stuff that I want to do with it. I also seen a bit of like an artistic exploration as well, and I think that's why this kind of morphs itself into a few different things because I definitely am going to probably be more on the end of like using those materials that I already have. Like I said, if I have some paper packs and things like that, I want to use them because otherwise I'm not. But that's not really found items. That's not a receipt from lunch or, the coffee, like a coffee container or the sleeve or whatever that I'm using for those kind of things, which I really do love the way that looks. But for me, I'm kind of treating it as a bit of both. Like I said, I'll be kind of punching all of this fun stuff out and kind of creating this junk journal spread from my vacation. But at the same time, taking one of these Archer and Olive like photorealistic papers that they've sent or something with some texture on it and punching those out and putting it in a different collection as well as a way of just like having fun and being creative.
Yeah, I've been finding for my junk journaling, it's mainly been stuff that I have collected mainly for like a memory keeping type deal. That's like kind of why I'm doing it. So a lot of the pieces, I'm not punching it down to a little stamp shape, even though I love yours. I think it's super cute. But because I want to be able to keep the kind of like majority of a material, it's more so just like cutting it or ripping it so that it'll actually fit into my notebook and then adding embellishments to the page with other materials that I have. Because having kind of like what we talked about with Erin, having one thing sitting on a page by itself, like in space, is kind of sad and lonely. So I do like to do some layering, and I don't necessarily always use junk to do the layering, but I will use other materials that I already have in my collection.
Yeah, it's something that Aaron said that's really stuck with me since that episode, and it's made me feel a lot more comfortable with exploring with this. Not that I've done it in anything recently, but I am definitely like moving towards it. Was her rule of three, like when layering and kind of picking those things, right? She said it was, something solid, something that was a texture, and then something that was a detail. I personally am still trying to figure out the difference between a texture and a detail because a lot of those tend to be the same in my mind. But that idea of like picking those types of things, I think are going to help me out a lot, especially as I start to explore more beyond like punching out the stamp pattern, right? And using those. But even so, like I think that also could lend itself to a lot of what I'm doing now too. So I don't know. I'm a big fan of the way that it's looking. I just saw something today online. It was someone who was kind of junk journaling, but they were making a playing card out of it, which was kind of neat. But it was a lot. And I was like, yeah, that's not a me thing. Like they were taking like washi tapes and they were taking PET tape and they were, putting little sprinkles inside of all of this stuff and they were stamping on it. And I was like, this is too much. It looks very cool, but like I know I can never do it. Like it almost started to move into like a mixed media type thing, but at the same time, it technically could be junk journaling too. Like that's what I don't know where to kind of put those certain things, but I'm definitely excited to continue to explore though and kind of see because it seems really fun. I feel like the baby steps, like rule of three, is what I got to stick with. Just pick three things and like try it out.
Yeah, I mean, what? How much junk do you need in a junk journal for it still to be a junk journal as opposed to a mixed media journal? We are not the junk journal police. We are not the planning police. We are not here to tell you what the hard and fast rule is. In theory, there were no rules, but we're out here making rules for ourselves and everybody else, it seems. Ah.
I mean, something I really like to do with it though is this idea of visual storytelling. That's also been like a really big thing. I had made a video over on my YouTube channel around using the junk mail flyers that we all get, like the value packs that's just stacked with like things inside of it. And I was like, let's see what I can do with this. And it was like after a while, I was starting to notice a bit of like a theme. I mean, there's always like window vendors in there. So like I had tons of windows I could punch out. And then you got like the landscapes and all this stuff. And there's a restaurant by me that's kind of like a old timey kind of like vintage restaurant, and their ad was really cool because they had like an old I guess a husband and wife on like a farm, so it was like black and white photo. They were dressed very like old school farmy, and I was like, oh, this would be cool. Let me kind of make a story out of this. And like I started to clip things out and put them together, building on a fake story. It was total fiction, but around, this farmer and his wife, and like, they're building a home for themselves. So I was like clipping out doors and windows and like flowers and kind of all those kind of things. And when I was done, I was so proud of myself because it was just, again, it was like a creative thing that I would have never ever done in my bullet journal. That's not like a thing that I would really do there, but I just felt like I had the permission to do it here and like be open and creative because it was my junk journal, so to say. So there was a lot of like permission that was given, but I really liked the way it looked and like a little story that I would have never written down myself. I think that's the other thing too. That's what I love about the visuals.
Yeah, I do like that note about permission to do things because yeah, in theory, in our planners or in our bullet journal, junk journal, whatever, like in all of them, there should be no need for permission because it is ours and we can do what we want or whatnot. But I do feel like it's like a self-imposed rules that I have for myself. Like, okay, in your 5-year journal, you will only do these things. You will only use this pen. You will only use this type of handwriting. In your everyday journal where you're planning all your things, you will only use these spreads, you will only use these layouts, things have to be cohesive, yada yada. Whereas with my junk journal, it's like anything goes, anarchy, stick down whatever, don't stick things in, just shove them in the notebook, kick it down the stairs. Okay, probably not, but like still, I find that the kind of like the permission that I give myself in that one is very nice and very freeing, but also kind of daunting, as we already kind of noted. But I also find that I still have that kind of like rule set for myself sneaking in particular around what I'm using it for. Because as someone who does consider themselves to be very purpose first, it's like, okay, anything you're creating, like what is the reason? And sure, sometimes the reason is just fun. And I should just let myself have fun, but I don't, it seems. But for me, junk journaling, the kind of purpose that I've assigned to it is memory keeping. But I also know that that's not my preferred way of memory keeping. I'm kind of the person who prefers to capture a memory in its entirety or as much of it as I can so that then I can really go back and live in that moment again. And the way that I typically like to do that is through video. Whereas with junk journaling, it feels like I'm just collecting memory prompts or memory aids that I still have to remember the thing that happened. Like I have to be able to look at the thing, have it jog my memory or like, prompt a thought for myself and still have to like, rely on the brain to be able to figure out what went down. And that is not something that I'm particularly good at. And thus, I don't know if junk journaling will have longevity or staying power for me because if I've assigned it that purpose, but it is not the best for me at fulfilling that purpose, then why bother putting in the effort?
I see what you're saying there. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like that could be something, and maybe again, you'd look like a weirdo, like you're out eating with your family and you're like, oh, I need a journal about this. And you like take part of your receipt and part of the menu. But like in the moment, though, put that into your notebook. Like it almost kind of takes away from it being overly curated, which I definitely feel like mine is in that kind of way, at least from a standpoint of like using the same shapes and thinking about the spacing and kind of how I want that to be. But at the same time, like I don't think I would ever be that person. Like I said, I'm already embarrassed that I'm like grabbing pieces of paper and business cards and things. The last thing you're gonna see me doing is being like ripping a page, using my little glue pen, sticking it, and then writing like a moment and what happened in this moment, where were we, whatever. But I do think though at the same time, like maybe that's not something that I would do, but maybe someone else would feel more comfortable in doing that. And then you're kind of relying on like what is the visual thing from this moment that is stands out to me the most, or maybe you can even go into a journal. There's probably things that won't go in there. And then writing down real quick, when that happened, where that was, maybe who you're with. Not doing long form journaling, because that's also like not a me thing. Like I don't ever really do that. And I also don't know that I'm technically doing any like short form journaling, at least not personal journaling, since I use my bullet journal so much for work. Like I'm never kind of taking a moment to write down like my current thoughts or kind of what's going on for me. But again, someone else though, they might be. So it could be like a way to like take that moment in time to reflect. So you're not trying to rely on your, swish brain memory later on.
Yeah, I do very much see the benefit of noting things down in the moment and recording in the moment because then everything is like as fresh as possible. And That's why people be out here buying traveling journaling kits and such, whether they're for junk journaling or otherwise. It is nice to have your own, like your travel glue tape and your travel scissors, the ones that you can actually take on a plane, or the ones that you'll pack in your like checked luggage so you don't get them confiscated. Anyway, but I do find that because in the moment I'm usually more wanting to like, be present, doy. Also film, because I know that that's going to be my preferred way of looking back on the memories later. I don't then also want to take time away to be like, hey, let me just get my journal out and my glue and my scissors and whatever and just like, scrapbook right here in the moment. But for some people, that's like super necessary, because otherwise what happens is that you accumulate all this stuff, especially if you're trying to do junk journaling on like a 2 week trip or something. You accumulate all of these things and then you get back and it's like, cool, now I've got homework to do, as opposed to this being like a fun and relaxing thing. It's now like work.
I think that's why I'm so afraid to go too deep into it. Like I can give myself the job of picking up, the flyer or, the little magazine or something like that, or again, a business card or, something you sit your drink on. Like I can like put this in my pocket real quick. But yeah, I'm not going to be the person that's like pulling my little punch off of my little chain and like doing that in the moment and then pasting it into like a journal. But also like I don't have a lot of pocket space, I guess, to really carry a journal around with me unless it was a pocket sized journal. And I'm talking like real thin. Like I'm not carrying this around in my pocket. Like I'm thinking much more around that traveler size or bullet journal came up with like a little pocket notebook, right? Something like that that really fits inside of my pocket and doing it that way. But it's just one of those things where like I'm also not, like we said, I'm not that person though to carry around my journal really. So it's not going to happen in the moment for me, but could for somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's also probably in part why there is that kind of like looming risk of just becoming a junk collector as opposed to a junk journaler. It's like, okay, cool. I'm really good at just like grabbing the thing in the moment, making sure I'm on the lookout for things that I could stick in later. But then if you don't give yourself the time to actually do the sticking in later, it's just like, cool. Now I have a pile of trash in my house instead of where it would have been, which is in the bin.
And that's essentially what's going to end up happening is you're just going to get so fed up with your pile of stuff, or like you said, you're not, I don't know, there's probably like a time limit everyone needs to like set for themselves. Again, no rules in junk journaling. We're like, no, but personally I need to give myself a rule that if I don't use that in the week's time, it goes inside of the recycling. Like for me personally, I know that if I don't do that, I will accumulate boxes and boxes and boxes of things. And every time I see something in the store, I'm going to be like, oh, I could junk journal with that. I could be putting that inside of my notebook and I could be swiping it and taking it, and doing whatever, but then not doing anything with it. And also, like, my memory isn't great. So I know that I only have probably a day or two worth of like that short term memory to remember like important details about what happened while I was at this restaurant with this person. Otherwise, it's just going to go out the door. And I'm not saving my receipts. That's one thing I'm not doing.
Yeah, I'm not a receipt saver. I'm exactly the same way because, like, what my junk journal was very much just like a way to fill up the back of my notebook. So it's just a bunch of things stuck in or whatever. And I had quite a few pages left in this notebook. So I was like, okay, cool. We're going to have like plenty of space to do more. So I've collected a bunch of materials. But this was my quarter 1 journal. We're in quarter 2 now. We're decently into quarter 2 now. And I still haven't done it. So it's like, what is the kind of time frame that I give myself to actually complete that project versus when do I just say like, hey, that ship has sailed, let the junk go.
I mean, it really does kind of fall into what I like about it so much, right? Is that like things we've talked about, like not really having those rules around it, but us as individuals, we know that we need something though. And I do think though that it is healthy, like you said, because then we just become journal collectors or junk collectors or both. Just this idea of like you're consuming and you're keeping and you're using and you're grabbing and you're doing, but then you're not really doing anything with it. And I think that could also lead down the path of like feeling really overwhelmed because suddenly now you're like, oh, I told myself and I grabbed these items and I'm going to do some journaling around this. And then like you said, you're 3 4 weeks down the road and then you pick up that receipt from coffee with your best friend and you're like, wait, what happened there? Oh, great. Well, okay, now is my junk journal chronological? Like I can't move on to the next thing. And I think that's where it starts to kind of spin out a little bit. And so it's like if you're that type of person, I don't think there's anything wrong with giving yourself some rules around it, and that way you're not just building up piles like I have off to the side of my camera.
I would love to know, like, in terms of the rules and guidelines to help make junk journaling, more approachable or easy or whatnot, what kind of rules have you set for yourself?
I mean, so for right now, the rule I set for myself is just kind of keeping to like the shape, right? What I love is the aesthetic of the stamp, right? I just really love that stamp shape. And it to me, it feels almost like a passport. I've been calling it like a stamp passport or like a junk journal passport or something, just because it is the theme of the stamp. So I bought myself one punch, right? Because I was like, okay, I don't need all the different size punches. Do I want them? Yes. Do I need them? No. So, like, that was the first rule I set for myself, especially as I started to go down this path. I didn't want to go too crazy, too fast. That is always in me to do those things. I know that about myself. The other thing with it has been to allow things to go wrong. Like, I was showing you before, like this Archer and Olive. So, like, these are all the packages from the last subscription box, right? All the different cartons and things like that. I had a very specific pattern that I was going for on this with like every other orange. And I did really well until here. And then I accidentally put two oranges together. And then I was like, well, now it's ruined. And then I was like, no, 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 Mark, you're okay. Just do more oranges, right? So like that's an example where I've just told myself, like, part of me wanted, no lie, to like second punch out the stamp shape I've already done with the paper backing so that I could put it in the order that I wanted to. That was there. And I stopped myself. First of all, that would be ridiculous. I couldn't personally, that's a lot of work. And I would mess it up somehow. But just to be like, Mark, it's okay. Like, you don't have to show this to anybody. I'm showing it to you. But I'm just like, you know what? I kind of like the way it looks now. Like I made it into something. It's like, what is that? Bob Ross is like, tiny little mistakes, or that's not a mistake, that's a tree, or whatever the hell he's.
Happy little accidents?
There you go, or that. But like that's kind of how I'm treating it. And so I'm also just like, yeah, be a mental problem solver. Like really practice problem solving with what you have. We all have made a mistake in our notebook and pasted those pages together or ripped them out. Just be okay with it. Just say, okay, I'm learning from this. Flip the page over and try it again later. Be more aware, be more mindful, right? Not just like throwing things on a page. So those have been my main thing. And then the last one I've done has been giving myself time limits, because if not, I know that first of all, my hyper focus on this new hobby will fade. I'm hoping that it doesn't, because I'm really enjoying myself creatively here. But I'm just like, okay, you brought this into your house. You have 2 weeks to do this. And I've so far been doing a pretty good job with it, because I also will sit it on my desk instead of putting it in a pile somewhere else. And I have to move it out of the way every time I need to get around it. And so for myself, I know that I get fed up with that. So there have been times when it's like I'm like, I'm not going to do this. And I just put it in the recycling bin. But other times where I'm like, okay, Mark, let's set a timer for 10 minutes. You said you were going to do this. Let's go ahead and just kind of like break these things down and kind of get it organized. And that's been super helpful for me. Do you have any rules for yourself that you've set up as you've gone through?
Yeah, so mainly mine is around like the collecting. So if we're collecting something to put into my junk journal, it should be tied to something I want to remember because, purpose first, mine's kind of for memory keeping. So it should be something that either prompts a memory, aids in a memory, or supports the memory. So for instance, like, I don't know, last year Vogel and I took our mini honeymoon, and one of the things that we got, or one of the things that we did while we were there was a perfume making class. It was so much fun. We had a great time. But when we got our things packaged up, they had some tissue paper in the bag that had like their logo on it and stuff. I'm like, okay, this is something that will aid in a memory. Like, I will keep that. I could junk journal with that. Whereas, if I've gone away for, like I've got a trip upcoming, for instance, if I go and collect flyers and whatnot for things that I didn't actually see, that doesn't aid in a memory. That's just me like hoarding trash. So, not those kind of things. Yes to the things that actually help with my memory prompts. My other rule for myself is more so in the construction, and that is no scissors unless you are going to be trimming around the outside of a page. So it's like if something hangs off outside the notebook, you can trim that away. That's okay. But in terms of actually laying the elements down onto the page, no scissors. So that means no fussy cutting. All right. You're allowed to do fussy ripping. you're allowed to rip things out, because I think that the organic edges kind of make me feel a little bit safer about there being other imperfections on the page. Whereas if I was allowing scissors for myself, I would start getting so particular, super persnickety biscuit energy. I would be like, oh no, the exact diameter on this like curved edge isn't perfect anymore. I can't possibly use it, kind of thing. And it would start to turn into more work than fun, more of a chore than it was leisure. So that's a rule for myself. And I do think that I would probably benefit from some type of like time frame rule. I don't currently have one, still hoarding my materials from my quarter 1 journal that I'm probably never going back to. But I might have to, like, let myself say, hey, that ship has sailed. It's time to move on. At the moment, I'm feeling like the soft deadline should just be at the end of this quarter. Like, hey, get rid of your quarter 1 materials at the end of quarter 2. That might work.
You'll just have this like forever backlog though of the previous quarters. I hear what you're saying there because there's a piece of it does feel like when you are scrapbooking, because again, we've all been here. We buy the materials, we have the books, we have the things, we have the glues, we have the tapes, the stickers, all of those things. But it just never feels like the right time to do it because you do have to take time out of your day or week or whatever that is to give it time to work on it. But I think that there's like so much power in allowing yourself to do that, literally scheduling time in the same way you would homework, the same would you would, would with extra work or laundry or cleaning. Like give yourself 30 minutes one day a week to spend time on that and kind of just really dedicate it to it. And I think that's like a really good way to like, force yourself in there and it's, actual time that you're giving towards that versus trying to find it in between calls or find it in between going out or chores or whatever that might be.
Yeah, and I think also just letting yourself, maybe reminding yourself that it does take time to learn. Like you're allowed to be a learner. It's allowed to be something that's new and a little challenging and daunting and such. But I think that the flexibility of the system does lend itself very nicely to practicing techniques and skills. And also, if you have other creative hobbies that you enjoy, in particular, I'm thinking paper crafting ones, but technically speaking, transfer skills are everywhere. So you can probably apply it in other areas as well. This is a really good opportunity to let your junk journal be the practice and the play space, and then you can bring those techniques into other areas of your creativity. One of the things I've seen people do that I absolutely love and have not tried for myself, but I'm very curious about, is the idea of taking a piece of sellotape, putting it over something that you want and rubbing over that to really secure the tape, and then just like ripping it off the thing. I feel like that one is probably a knack. I would end up like ruining so many things, but I love the idea of it and I want to try it out. I just haven't gotten myself there.
I've seen the same videos you have. I see it all the time. It's like how to create a cool font. They're like, it's like they're waxing someone. Like that's what it looks like. I just know that I would do it. It would just rip a hole in the paper. Like I don't think that I'm going to get the transfer that I'm looking for. But I think the idea is that again, you're trying it, right? You're giving yourself the time, the space to give it a try. And it probably is a skill that you have to figure out, like what is the right angle, or do I have to hold it a certain way, or how long do I, go over top of that tape over the thing before I pull it up. Like I'm sure there's a lot that goes into it, but I think that's just something that could be really exciting about just having a junk journal or a play journal even. Like you don't want to give it a specific name or again it's almost like a research and development journal for your junk journal, which I know goes against like everything that we've talked about in this episode. But I also don't think there's anything wrong with having like a curated junk journal. Like I think that is something that's super fun as long as it's not holding you back from using it. I guess like that's where I'm kind of coming from is like there's nothing wrong with having a bunch of pocket notebooks and being like, hey, the same way you would with like a traveler's notebook. Like this notebook is for this topic. This is for this topic. I mean, I have three kind of versions of like my little like stamp junk journal things now because I'm in my experimentation mode. I'm like, oh, do I want it on a line? Do I want it on a dot grid? I've been thinking about maybe using one of my blackout journals because I think that would look really cool, right? Like it's opening up ideas to me, but I also have to really hold myself in and be like, Mark, finish the one before you pick up the next one because then I'm gonna have like four like not even partially started junk journals just because I know that's how I am. So I'm trying to be very focused about this one.
Yeah, I also think that another kind of benefit of letting it be the play space, the experimental space, and all of those kind of things is that at least you're experimenting with materials that, in theory, were just going to go in the recycling anyway. Like you're giving yourself an opportunity to, play around with collaging and you're ripping things up and all of that type of thing with materials that you didn't hopefully pay an arm and a leg for. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's how I feel about a lot of stuff, especially when I'm seeing people use like grocery items to do it. Like I've seen some people like punch out like chip bags. And I don't know how that works because I feel like the plastic would just like rip, like it wouldn't work out. They figured it out though. But what I also really love about this whole hobby junk journal thing, and we've mentioned it a few times, is paying attention a little bit more to the things that usually you just pass by. Like this seems like a very stupid one, but I was changing out my air filter for my AC system, and the packaging on the front of the filter actually had some really cool icons on it. It was like, for like dust and like clean and like all these things. And I haven't years I've been using the same filters. Never even look twice at it. I crumple it up, I put that in recycling, I take the plastic wrap, I put that in the trash. I've been doing that for years, but when I started doing this, I was like, "Oh, okay, like this is actually kind of cool. Like this is something that is neat and it looks really awesome." I've also been doing it. This is one of those other bad things too, but I feel like a junk person. But like Chipotle, for instance, right? If you, I don't know, do you guys have Chipotle in New Zealand?
We don't. We know what it is, but we don't have it.
So like their bag, I mean, this is just the bag that like the Chipotle food came in, but they've got such cool illustrations on their bags and stuff like that. And again, I mean, I've seen it as a designer. I pay a lot of attention to packaging, but that is something usually I would have just thrown away, right? But now I'm like, oh, rip out that part. I didn't keep the whole bag after it was done. I just kept the part that I wanted. But like that is just something that like I would never have looked twice at it before. So it also, I think, gives a lot of appreciation for art and design on what we think is just trash at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's kind of almost becomes like a mindfulness activity because you are paying attention to things and being more mindful about the design elements on things and such, and whether they could be, supporting materials in your junk journal if it's more for memory keeping, or actually the kind of feature if it's really just that kind of creativity aspect. But of course, Planet Pals, we would love to hear from you. Have you tried junk journaling? Or, what are your kind of thoughts about it? Do you like it? Do you loathe it? Let us know either in the comments on YouTube, or you can hit us up at plannerpalspodcast@gmail.com or over on Instagram at plannerpalspodcast.
Well, thank you so much, Jess. This is a great topic. I love being able to talk to people about this because everyone in my house right now is like, "Will you stop grabbing every piece of paper that you see everywhere?" So it was a great topic. And Planner Pals, we cannot wait to hear from you down in the comments. And until next time, friends, talk to you later.